It is December the 3rd of 2021, and I am here in the gift shop. And I'm trying to keep this as short as possible. I did record another video that was like way too long, and I was kind of stumbling in my words because that's just how my brain works, or doesn't work, or whatever you want to call that. Sometimes my brain is thinking one thing and something else completely comes out, and I don't know until after I've reviewed the video, and then I have to do a lot of heavy editing. So I'm going to try to get through this video without having to do that, because I can't figure out how to edit videos on this phone. I usually don't use my phone. Actually, this is the first time I have done a video for my YouTube with the phone, because I don't like the quality. I like to use my handheld phone. It's just, I've had that little phone for a very long time, and I absolutely love it. But for the sake of expedience and getting something uploaded, I'm going to do a video on this one. So it's been a really crazy 2 years. There's been a lot of death in my family. Some of you might remember from one of my last YouTube videos where I was actually speaking at a funeral service that my aunt, one of the ones who raised me, who I consider to be my second mother, I actually lived with her from the ages of 12 to 18. She passed away in 2019. And that was a really big loss for everybody in the family, because she was the oldest girl in her family, and she was a caregiver. She looked after all of her siblings. She looked after her grandmother. She looked after her great uncle. Both of those people had severe dementia. The great uncle also was said to have shell shock from the war. It was a very tough situation for a 17-year-old girl to deal with, and she did it, and she's looked after so many other family members' children, and we just happened to be the last ones that she raised. So there was that, but there's also things this last year and a half that have been in my own household, and losing creatures who I loved more than anything and considered my children. I've lost 4 of my fur children this last year and a half. Icarus, my cat, my oldest female, she passed away last September 2020. She had a slightly more rare and very aggressive form of oral cancer, which was eating away the bones in her jaw. And at the time of her diagnosis, she seemed to be still in very good spirits. She just had a little bit of redness in her gums, and her face was starting to get a little puffy. She actually told me that there was something wrong with her by getting up on the table, staring at me really intently, like she would, and just going, wiping her face. And I said, Icarus, is there something wrong with your face? And she looks at me even more intense and just wipes her face again. And I said, well, let me look. And I looked in her mouth, and it didn't really look right in there. So I said, okay, we will call the vet. So the vet took some x-rays, and her jaw was almost non-existent on the x-ray, because the way that this cancer works is it starts on the inside and works its way to the outside. So by the time you find it, there's really nothing you can do about it. One of her teeth was loose. It was her canine tooth. And it was actually, there was no socket for it. And the reason she was having some swelling at that point is there was a bit of an infection where the socket had been, where the tooth was still kind of in there but kind of floating. So she got antibiotics for that infection and to hopefully have it drained. But there was nothing that can be done for her, because her jawbone was being eaten away. So a couple of months after that, the tumor had ruptured. It just kept spewing this really horrible material that really did smell of death, and she stopped eating. as well as she was. She was still eating, but she just wasn't eating as much. She was starting to lose some weight, and she completely stopped grooming herself. And for a cat to stop grooming themselves, it's quite serious. So I had to make the decision to have her euthanized, and that was a really hard decision for Icarus because she was still very mentally alert. She was still very much there. She was just starting to become unhappy. But I knew that if we let her go any longer, then she would be absolutely miserable, and I did not want that for her. So we lost her September the 28th of 2020. And in December, her son Checkers was diagnosed with hyperthyroid and the beginning stages of kidney failure. So he's been on medication for that, or I should say he was on medication. In January, Callisto, my dog Callie, was diagnosed with a slower growing but extremely large cancerous mass. They said that this thing must have been growing for several years. Now, she had started slowing down when she was 7 years old, and I had her to her regular vet, and they kept saying, no, well, she's 7 years old, she's a senior now, she's going to start slowing down. But it's like something just never ever felt right about them saying that she was just slowing down, because I've known other dogs, I've had other dogs who were like hyper like puppies right until they were in their teen years, and it was getting close to their end before they started to slow down. But she was also taking these episodes where she would have some abdominal bloating, and there was a couple of times where she had this bloating and she would not get up. So I decided I should really have another opinion. I'm going to take her to the vet that saw Icarus, because that was not our regular vet. That was the only veterinarian that was taking new patients and letting the humans go in with the animal into the clinic when they're seen. Because that's very important for me, that I am there with my child when they are examined by their doctor. So I also had taken Checkers to them. They treated the cats great. So I figured, well, I'll take Callie up there and get a second opinion on her bloating, her not wanting to go on her walks, not wanting to do any of her tricks. Like, she used to love to sit pretty. Like, she would be up for a cookie like all the time. But she completely stopped doing it. She would not jump up and sit in the chairs. She was having a harder time doing things, and her first vet was saying, no, it's just because she's getting old. She's a senior. But like, when I look at her, I just kept feeling something in my stomach. It's like, how are you feeling, Callie? And it's just stomach. There's something in there, in nauseous feelings. So they took her in. They were concerned about pyometra because she was having a lot of abdominal swelling. She was having some difficulty with her breathing. And they were concerned that where she was not spayed, she might have pyometra, and I knew that was not what it was. I was more concerned with her symptoms of it being Cushing's disease, but it was neither pyometra or Cushing's. It was something far more serious. They did an x-ray, they did ultrasound, they did blood work. I took in a stool and a urine sample, and they examined everything. And 3 hours waiting in the vet for the diagnosis and everything to come back. And the vet was very upset when she came into the room to tell me what was going on, that Callie had a very large abdominal tumor that was cancerous. She was outputting a lot of calcium into her urine, which meant that it had already spread through her body. And the size of this thing, they could not tell me what it was attached to inside her abdominal cavity, because it was actually obscuring her internal organs. We could not see anything because this thing was huge. It took up quite a large part of her abdomen. And where it had already spread, it was likely into her bones and all through her body. There was no way to operate and take this tumor out. And the veterinarian was very concerned that with the weight of this thing, that at any time it could let go, and it could, as the tumor grew and got heavier and heavier, that eventually it's going to rip off and tear from whatever it's attached to, whatever blood supply that is feeding this tumor, whatever it is attached to, it's going to tear it, and she could at any time bleed and go into shock, and then she would be gone. And that was just like a ticking time bomb. Like, we did not know when. So the option was left open, like, what do we do about this? So Callie was still very happy. She was eating. She was slowing down, but she was not in any pain with this thing. Like, she was quite the trooper with that. She was uncomfortable. She kind of felt a little nauseous at times, but she wasn't suffering. So I had asked the vet, is there a possibility that she could make it to the spring so that I can bury her at home? Because this was in December and it was cold and the ground was starting to freeze, and I need to have my pets buried here at home. I do not let anybody else dispose of my children. So we gave her antibiotics, we gave her anti-inflammatories, she was on a painkiller. We just went the palliative care route for her and made sure that she's as comfortable and as happy as absolutely possible. And for 2 months, she did really, really well. A lot of the bloating and swelling went down. She didn't have any more episodes where she couldn't get up. Although it was starting to get a little hard for her to get up in the end, just because it's like, if you have this thing in your stomach, it's kind of hard to move a bit. But I helped her as much as I could. And the end for her was March the 6th, 2021. We got up, we started our morning, she had her breakfast, and I took her for a short little walk through the body farm, because that became our walk. We cut a new little trail and we just walked around a little loop and come out and came back in the house. So grade 769 was finishing up his cereal, and he always left a little bit in the bottom of the bowl just for her. So she was in the kitchen, she was eating the rest of the cereal. I started making some crafts at the kitchen table, and then grade 769 took his toast out to the living room, and I look up and there's Callie happily wagging her tail, and she's coming out of the kitchen. She walks by me, she just has this huge smile on her face, and I go back to crafting, and then I hear grade 769 yell out, she's going, she's going. And I turn and I look, and she's kind of swaying like she's drunk, and she's getting ready to fall. And I run across and I grab her, and she just kind of falls into my chest, and I guide her down onto the floor, and I just tell her how much I love her and pet her, and got my composure, because I thought that she was dying right then, but she just had a massive drop in blood pressure because the tumor had separated from whatever it was attached to, and she was bleeding out inside and going into shock. So I get her comfortable, I get her in her bed, I get her little blanket on her, I make sure she's really settled and comfy, and I put on some music for her. And so then I have to try to find Big Doggy, because he has the vehicle, and he has gone into the local town, about half an hour away, to go get some hardware stuff and to visit his dad. So I call his dad and I tell his stepmom, when he gets there, tell him to come home, because Callie's tumor has let go. We have to take her to the vet immediately. We have to go to the vet. So I was on the phone with the vet as well, and asking them, what can I do to keep her comfortable? I think she's going into shock. Her tumor has separated. She's bleeding out. What do we do? Is there anything I can do for her at home? And they said, without actually looking at her, they can't really assess what is going on. So they close at 1 o'clock that day, and so it's kind of a race against time to get her up to the clinic, because when something like this happens, they could pass really quickly, or they can linger for days. And I did not want Callie to be slowly bleeding out and going into shock. I wanted her to go as quickly as she could, in as little pain as she could. And even though she was bleeding out internally and she was going into shock, she never cried. She never made any yelps or nothing. Like, she was just such a strong dog. Just like she was a very, very strong individual. And like, there had been times when I had been taking her for a walk, and we were somewhere around where a porcupine had walked through, where I'd gotten hit by a car, and she had gotten a quill in her nose or in her paw, and like, she never even cried for that. And I'd notice she'd be limping, and I'd say, "Let me see your foot," and she'd put her foot up, and I see a quill, and I said, "Now hold on," and I just ripped this thing out. She never cried then either. Like, she was so strong. She was one of the strongest individuals I've ever known. So we got her up to the vet. We got her in the car by holding her up in the blanket as a stretcher. And 2 minutes from the clinic is when she lost complete consciousness. She needed to use the washroom, and she was never the type of dog, after she was potty trained, to have an accident. Like, she refused. She just had to be outside. She would hold herself till she was busting, and she needed to go. So she had been laying in my lap. She pushed herself up into a sitting position, and that was the end of her blood pressure. It's like she just quickly forced herself up and immediately lost consciousness and fell backwards towards the door. And I just had her harness, and I very gently laid her down into the floor, because I couldn't pull her back into me. I had to let her go to the floor with gravity, but I made sure she landed gently, and she did not wake up again. She couldn't. Her blood pressure was so non-existent that the vet, when I carried her into the clinic and we were getting her set up for her injection to put her to sleep, they could hardly, the tourniquet was on as tight as I could get it, and there was nothing. She had a really hard time getting that line in. And it was just really hard listening to her heartbeat and having her heart skipping. She had a slight arrhythmia anyway from birth, but just listening to her heartbeat and hearing it stop and then start again, and just, I could hear her shutting down pretty much. And that's one thing that kind of surprised the vet, is like, I don't think there's very many people who they come in and they bring their own stethoscope so that they can listen to their dying dog's heartbeat. But that's just the kind of person that I am. I can still hear her heart in my mind. She used to absolutely love to play doctor with me. It's like, I get the stethoscope out, she gets excited, she came running and up in the chair, and just, because I wanted to make sure that she was always going to be good with the vet. So we used to play vet at home, and I'd look in her mouth and all sorts of things. But that was the loss of Callisto, and I still miss her and think about her all the time, and I always will. And then after she had passed, we lost our gerbil Squeak. He was 3.5 years old. I can't remember if it was late April or May. It was either April or May that we lost him. And then, as I stated a little earlier in the video, Checkers had been sick with hyperthyroid and beginning of kidney failure. And over this Thanksgiving, he had a stroke, and everything was closed, of course, so we couldn't take him to the vet. But he didn't seem like he was suffering. He was uncomfortable, but he wasn't crying out. He didn't seem like he was in active pain. and I did give him some medications to help him with the pain because we had some of his mother's painkillers left over from when she had cancer. But he had taken a nap, and when he woke up, his head was like, his neck was hyperextended but then twisted at this really sharp angle, and he could not move his neck, and his legs were straight out ahead of him, really, really stiff, and he was not walking right. And then he kind of like laid down in his bed, and he kind of seemed like he lost consciousness for the rest of the evening, and then he was gone in the morning. But I stayed with him and I petted him and for most of the day, just to make sure that he was comfortable. And that was kind of hard too, because he was Icarus's second born child, and I delivered him when he was born, as I delivered all of Ike's kittens except for Snowflake, because she came when I went to the bathroom. I had to run right quick. But the first thing that he smelled was me. He smelt my scent before he smelt his mother's scent, because I've been doing cat midwifery since I had been a child. So I had, as soon as Ike went into labor, I had the face cloths, the warm wet ones and the dry ones, and I had everything all set and ready. So I caught him, and then I kind of roughed him up a bit to make sure that the mucus was cleared from his lungs, and clearing all the stuff off of his little face, and then just holding him up to my face and cuddling him like I cuddled all the kittens when they were born. It's just, literally from cradle to the grave, this boy has been in my life, and I loved him a great deal, and I still love him. But that's pretty much the end of the deaths. We had a really close call with Jack, little doggy. We had a really close call with him. The raccoons ripped open the garbage on the trailer. We were getting ready to take it to the dump, and the raccoons ripped it open, and some stuff got taken out onto the ground, and no idea what it was. I had to go into Hope for Wildlife to do a supply run and things like that. So when I got home, the menfolk were in a panic because Jack had eaten something outside, and they did not know what he ate. He was having mild convulsions, he was hallucinating, he was like, his eyes, his pupils were so dilated that a pen light wouldn't react to the pen light. His heart rate was up, his temperature was, he definitely had a high fever, he was panting like he couldn't get enough oxygen, like, his heart was like, I've never heard a heart race like that. So, like, this dog was like, when I got home, he was so close to cardiac arrest, and his temperature, like, he could have brain damage from just getting too overheated. So we had called the vet, the emergency vet, 2 hours away, only clinic open, said, oh, just go to your nearest vet clinic. It's like, you are our nearest vet clinic and the only one open. So I said, you know what, we can't take him in there, they're not going to see him. They don't seem to think that this is an emergency for some reason, even though the dog is like getting ready to have a heart attack. Grab me some peroxide, get me the syringe, we are gonna flush the stomach out. We're gonna do home veterinary medicine. So, long story short, after like 6 hours, we got him fine, and like he slept it off the next day. If it wasn't for the fact that as a child, I was a really weird kid who sat by myself on the playground reading adult level books on dog care and dog raising and at home veterinary medicine, this dog would have died, because peroxide saved his life. And I'm going to mention this again in another video, because the morning that this all happened, there was something supernatural in the backyard, and that's definitely going to be another video. So I think that at 25 minutes, this video is long enough. I just wanted to let everybody know what has been going on here, why I've been kind of quiet, and I'm starting to get back into doing things that I love, things that make me happier as a human, and doing YouTube videos is certainly one of those things. So I'm back on YouTube, but it's not going to be a really quick thing. I'm not going to jump right in and do like multiple videos per week. I'm going to this is bugging me, I got to move this. Just one of the sun catchers is kind of off kilter. I had to straighten it. Anyway, my brain again. Yeah, I'm going to be doing more videos. I want to get back into the swing of things. If there's any videos that you would like to see me do, just let me know in the comments, because I'm going to be taking requests. I'm going to do some things that are a lot different than the other things I did in the past. In the past, it was more like a show and tell, kind of a mild forensic investigation, like this is what happened to these animals, and look at this, and isn't this interesting, that type of thing. I want to get into more spiritual things on this channel, like the more spiritual aspects of working with dead animals. A lot more of the shamanistic things, and a lot more ghost stories, of course, because I really do want to get back to doing the Tales from Shears Hill. I'm always looking for submissions. If you guys have had ghost stories or really creepy things happen, send me a message and I will read that in the videos. You can either remain anonymous, or you can tell me your name and I will share that with the viewers. But if anybody has like a real spooky story and they're terrified to tell it because I think people are going to think they're crazy, send it to me anyway. We will give you a different name than your own. Because things like this, they're great to know that weird things happen and people are experiencing things. We got to get those words out there that there is something after this life. And I've had so many crazy things. I just love to get into the story about what I seen the morning that Jack got sick, and then all the little things that had spiraled into that, and what it was I seen, because I know what I saw. And I even told the menfolk before I left to go to work and then to go to Hope for Wildlife and then go to the bigger city and get all the supply run and all that stuff. I told them what I seen and I said, watch the dog. And then they don't watch him and he gets sick. Anyway, we're now at almost a half an hour. I just want to say, hey, I'm here. And again, any requests for videos, if you guys want to see something, just send it in the comments. And I will do my best to do more videos. I have to do more videos because, as I said, it's one of those things that I really liked. And being a really bad introvert, it gets me to speak, it gets me to interact with other humans, and as much as I like to think that I don't need that, I do. So, I'll see you guys in the next video.